It's inspiring to me to see somebody that has come through all of the years that you've come through, is seeing all the things you've seen, having to work undercover for 14 years and come out the other side. The person that you are is inspiring. Everybody has a door they have to walk through. It doesn't matter if it's, in your case, it was retirement, but we all go through chapters, seasons in our lives where we're met with a door.
How that starts is as you read it, it talks about briefing at a search warrant. We're going to go take down a homicide suspect who we know is armed. And I do that so many times, and those doors never gave me any apprehension. And here I got to, you're simply going to retire, and it's freaking you out, or you're trying to make a change in life, and you know that you're not going to get killed by making this change. We get so apprehensive of the things that we want to try to control. And yet I used to be paid to do the extremely dangerous stuff, and that didn't give me apprehension because I'm just going to control what I can there.
When it's time for them to make a change and go through that next door, a lot of people can be hesitant. They simply don't know what is on the other side. I would quite often tell them to trust that God has a plan and to simply move forward. And I believed it, or so I thought. On page 255, you say, but when it came time for me to retire from the SWAT team in 2022, that next door I had to open was the hardest door I had come into contact with. I felt as if it slammed behind me, locked. Closing the final door of my career, I prayed about this door. Not praying that God had chosen a good path for me, but rather praying that I could lift up my will to that of His. Praying that He could help me follow the path laid out before me. And at the bottom you say, now I follow Him even though I sometimes try to go back to the old Paul and be in control of everything. It is yet another learning point that when we give our lives to Christ, it is not the end of our journey. Rather, it is simply the beginning. We will stumble along the way. We will revert to our old selves. Once in a while, we will forget to put on the armor of God and try to go it alone. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed, whether you're watching on Rumble or YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you find this show. If you don't want to miss another episode, head to defenders-live.com and become a free subscriber. That way, every new episode gets delivered straight to your inbox. And if you're looking for top-tier firearms and self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and check the calendar to see what's coming to your area this year. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I am your host, Laura Thorson. Today's guest is Paul Milone, a 25-year veteran of the Omaha Police Department, whose career reads like a true crime thriller. And in fact, he wrote the book on it. His memoir, Ram 1, became an Amazon bestseller in 2024, pulling back the curtain on a life spent balancing undercover narcotics work, high-risk SWAT operations, and the cost of living two lives at once. Over the course of his career, Paul ran more than 300 direct undercover buys, thousands of surveillance operations, and served on over 1,100 SWAT missions, including one that ended in saving a hostage's life. He's a certified sniper, explosive breacher, and firearms instructor with decades of experience teaching realism-driven training through his company, Ram Master Training. Paul joins us today to talk about the lessons, sacrifices, and insights forged in the crucible of America's toughest law enforcement work. Let's welcome Paul onto the show. Hey, Paul.
How you doing, Laura?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for taking the time today. I am really excited about this interview. I could not read this book fast enough. This book to me was like, if I were to compare it to a meal, it was a meal that I never wanted to end. I just kept wanting to read and read and read. And I think I read this in a couple of days because of that. I couldn't put it down.
Well, thank you for saying that. It was an enjoyable project to do, and I've had pretty good feedback on it. So thank you.
Yeah, it is. It's really amazing how detailed you were in some of the descriptions. I felt like I was like writing alongside you in some of these stories. And some of these are just unbelievable and so well written. I don't know if you had an editor, but if you did, they did a good job on this as well. The cover is really nice. Everything about this book is just perfect. The length of it is perfect. But I want to dig into a few things, actually a lot of things. And one of the things that I found really interesting about your book was, and let me get my notes here because I have notes on notes. I'm just going to put them over here on this other screen because there are portions of this book I want to read today, little portions of it written in your own words. And the first part is how do I want to say it? The lead off. The how we get to know Paul right out of the gate is this hostage story that you lead off with, which is unbelievable. Like, I know I'm reading a book, but it feels like it's not real life, but you live this.
Yeah.
Could you set the stage for where were you in your career when this hostage situation happened? And how did it change, not just you, but your training?
So I had about 11 years on the department at the time. I'd been on the SWAT team for 5 years. I've been training like a madman during that entire time frame. I was currently assigned to the narcotics unit on our evening shift. So already kind of living a double life, the laid back life of a narcotics guy, and then the other side of being SWAT, go, go, go all the time.
Mm.
At the time, I was 40 years old when that happened. I got on a little bit later in life. So I had some maturity about me. And it was a Friday night, and it was just before 10 o'clock. And I would have been off at 10. We had just finished serving a narcotics search warrant. And I was probably 15 minutes away from leaving after booking in property, and I was going to go home and have some beer. I was completely looking forward to being done because we've been working so many hours. Mm-hmm. And then my phone rang.
And you had an unbelievable scene when you showed up. This man was very mentally ill, and he was holding a baby and a sword. Am I right?
Well, we never saw him holding the baby, but yeah. So the short of it is he was a paranoid schizophrenic that was off of his medication. He was having auditory and visual hallucinations throughout the day. He had beat up his wife, his baby's mama, and threw her out of the apartment, government housing unit, and was then threatening to kill the baby. Part of his hallucinations, which were ongoing for many, many months, apparently, so he literally thought he was a king, like King Arthur.
Oh, yeah.
He had a crown and a sword and a chest plate of armor and a throne in his room, gold goblets. He literally was out of his mind. He thought he was a king. And so when I arrived on the scene, our SWAT team is a part-time SWAT team, and it takes 45 minutes-ish for the team to assemble, maybe an hour for the team to assemble on a full team call out and get to a location. But anybody that's on duty, you get a page and you go right to the scene and start trying to handle the perimeter and whatever the situation is. And I was only a few blocks away when I got the phone call. So I got there pretty quick and made my way up to the 12th floor of the building, of the high rise. And there was a stack of uniformed patrol officers and some gang officers, and luckily a couple of other SWAT guys already outside the door. And I could hear the chaos as soon as the elevator opened. This guy was ranting and raving and screaming and chopping at the door with the sword and all the things he was screaming. And I realized, holy smokes, this is real. So many barricaded subjects over the years they're not as dangerous, right? Mm-hmm. And so many of the quote unquote hostage situations really aren't. The person's out, or they're not really being held against their will, or the hostage taker's not really threatening to kill them. They're just boyfriend, girlfriend having a problem. He has a gun. But this was, you can tell right off the bat, this was legitimate. And the feeling is we're going to kill this guy. It just, everybody there was like, hey, this isn't going to end well. Mm-hmm. And so we worked through the process a little bit. There was an on-scene sergeant who was negotiating through the door until one of our department trained negotiators arrived, my partner, Chris Perna, my narcotics partner. And he started taking over the negotiations. and we're getting updates from the SWAT team. Hey, they're still 30 minutes out because they're getting the rest of the gear. And it just devolved so fast that we had a hasty plan of, we're probably going to have to go without the rest of the team here.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other specialists that were there, our rappel master, Craig, he couldn't find a rappel point on top of the building. It was the only tall building around. Omaha doesn't have a lot of big buildings. So there was no possible place to put a sniper across the way to resolve it from the outside. So it soon realized we were going through this door against a guy who was out of his mind completely and has a sword. And you could tell by how hard he was hitting the door that this wasn't some little plastic toy sword or a knife or a machete, that this thing had some heft to it. So there wasn't a lot of apprehension or fear, but it was like, hey, it's game on. Today is the real deal. Good thing we've trained a lot. And so it just continued to evolve, and the decision was made. We can't wait another 20 minutes for SWAT to get there. And we made the decision as a 5-man team, the 5 of us that were there that were SWAT trained, made a decision to go.
Mm. And so there was a baby in the room.
Yes.
You didn't necessarily have a hold of it, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay.
And one of the scary things was, Laura, is that we never heard the baby cry once.
Oh.
And so there's in the back of your mind is, man, did he already kill her? Or are we already too late?
Right.
We're going to go in and see this baby cut in half, and how many guys are going to quit the job? Whatever it is. We were fearful because the baby wasn't crying.
Right. Yeah. So when you finally did breach the door and go in, what was going on? What did you see?
Well, just a little backstory on that. So the on-scene sergeant, Sergeant Bob Wandra, he had made the decision to go through the door with a bunker. And for all of the SWAT guys listening, they're going to say, you don't take a bunker on hostage rescue. Mm. Because that's what the manuals tell you. You don't take a bunker on hostage rescue. You want guns going through first. But in our quick little discussion, the thought was, if the first guy going through with his rifle, his M4, gets hit from the side and he loses his arms, or at least the ability to use his arms, well, then we got a pile of bodies in the doorway and we're going to fail.
Right.
And Sergeant Wanderer decided he's going to go through the door with a bunker. And if there was no immediate threat on him hitting him, then he'd simply roll out, and the number 2, which was me, would lead the way with the rifle. And so that's exactly what happened. We got a key to the door and opened it quietly. Door opened. Sergeant Wander rolled in, and the suspect was about, 15 to 18 feet in the room, or in the apartment, standing adjacent to the door to the bedroom, to his right or left. And as we came in, I brought my rifle up, and I didn't have a shot. I didn't see the baby, but I saw this wild-looking man bolt to the room. And so what seemed like maybe a second, I got to the doorway where he was. And as I got to the doorway, my wingman behind me, Rob, took up a kneeling position, unbeknownst to me. And I saw the suspect standing in the room. There was a single mattress on the floor with no sheets, no coverings, no frame on the floor. And he was straddling the corner of the mattress. And in between his feet was the 9-day-old baby. And as I come in, he's standing there basically with a sword here.
Oh my God.
Ready to plunge it into the baby. And as I snapped to the door, we made eye contact. He was probably 4 feet away from me, maybe. We made eye contact, and he literally looked him in the eyes and said, I'm going to kill her. And so I brought my rifle up the rest of the way and ended up shooting him in the face, which turned into a huge training deal for us later. The bullet entered right here, and it exited right here. His head slapped over and blew out his teeth and some of his mouth, and he looked right back at me. And so my mind's going, holy smokes, these bullets aren't working. What is plan B? And this has happened in just micro speed time frame. I dropped my sights down and figured they're not working on his head, so I'll just start shooting him in the body so he doesn't kill the baby. And I shot him once, basically in the kind of just below his nipple. He was turned a little bit, and then he instantly dropped. And I thought I had maybe taken out his spine because he dropped almost like he was paralyzed. But as soon as he hit the mattress, he reached back for the baby. So this was a training success. The first one was a training failure where I shot him in the face. The second one was a training success. I followed his body down just like we're taught in the range all the time. Follow him down. Does he need to be shot again? And I followed him down. As he reached back for the baby, I shot him one more time. And I could tell that he was dead instantly at that point. So.
And these were rifle rounds.
Rifle rounds, yeah.
Wow.
62 grain, soft nose, Remington Corlock bullets.
And you said he was 4 feet away from you?
4 feet. And
Wow.
and therein lied the problem originally, Laura, was that I was using an EOTech, and there's about a 2.5-inch offset on the EOTech from the muzzle.
I was thinking this too.
And in the police training world, we don't always think everything through. And I had shot hundreds of thousands of rounds, and we talked about the theory of an offset, but we had never shot paper targets at that close of a distance because your paper explodes.
Oh.
And now there's better targets on the market that have the coating on them so they can take some rain and they don't blow up as much. But those old school, cheap, really thin paper targets explode from the muzzle blast when you shoot them that close. So you can't even really see where your impact is anyways.
Wow.
So I hadn't had enough super fast practice on dealing with the 2.5-inch offset on a brain shot at 4 feet without having to think about it.
Right.
So as I brought my EOTech up, my dot came up to where it probably should have been, the hairline. And I told myself in a microsecond, you're too high, bring it down. So I brought it down between the eyes.
So your first instinct was right then.
And literally, as I squeezed the trigger, even as the bullet's just exploding, I told myself, damn it, you're too low. Because I then knew my impact was going to be low, and that's when it hit him here.
Wow.
So with that problem, then my head of having to have a discussion with myself, even though it was super fast, once it was over, I told myself, I'm not going to let that happen again, and nor am I going to let that happen to anybody on the team.
Yeah. So
we started training with mannequin heads that we would get from the local beauty salon that they're going to throw away. A perfect 3D head with different color eyes and nose shapes and lips and ears and different hair. And you could turn them at whatever angle you wanted to turn. And now you were focused on an anatomical feature versus a 2-dimensional paper target.
Yeah.
And it really changed our training mantra on the department.
Wow. And so you're not saying you never trained offset. Obviously you did. You're saying you never trained offset that close before. Which is what you're saying.
We didn't shoot targets that close because it just blows up the targets. We knew that there is offset, right?
So and that just shows even more that what you train is what you're going to do.
100%. And it was a little bit embarrassing, to be honest, for me, but for the rest of the guys, we're like, we never even do that. We don't train on that. And we're the premier SWAT team in the state of Nebraska, which it's not a big state, but we're by far the busiest team in the Midwest. We're doing 150 SWAT hits, high-risk search warrants a year, and a total of probably 200 operations, and that's busier than some full-time teams. And we're a part-time team. And so we kind of thought, hey, we're pretty good. And again, it is a very good team, but we just realized a training deficiency. Yeah. And so we addressed it.
Yeah. Well, that's the only thing you can do at that point, right? I mean, make sure it doesn't happen again. And you still did what you were supposed to do. I assume the baby was okay.
Baby was alive.
Was alive. Okay. That's good. Because I wanted to know how that story ended. Because the end wasn't the guy for me. The end was the baby. How's the baby? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, she'd be 15 years old now.
Yeah. No kidding. Wow. Yeah. Unbelievable. You said she was 9 days old.
9 days old.
I just don't know how the mother left without her. Anyway, that's a whole other topic, I guess. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, that's one way to open the conversation. Don't see that every day, as they say, right?
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I talk about in the book is that we trained for every scenario we thought could ever come up. And because of the bunker, we brought the bunker in. We had never trained for someone armed with a 4-foot sword and we're trying to rescue a baby. And how do we get through a narrow doorway in a housing project, doorway and hallway? So we had never trained it. And so because of what we found out on that operation, we changed our mantra that always and never doesn't exist in SWAT. And it really doesn't exist in police work. You can have your policies and procedures, say this will never happen, or we always do this. But there can be a situation to where, hey, we don't do this, but today we're going to for some odd reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've literally written that in the policy that they don't exist. We have to think outside the box always.
Extreme problem solving.
Yes.
Sounds like that's what that job is. And Adam, when we train with Adam Winch, he always talks about that he's trying to make, what does he call it? His biggest objective is to teach someone how to think with a gun, not just how to use a gun, but how to think with one. And I think there's a very big difference between just being good with one versus being able to solve problems, like thinking things through and doing that under extreme stress. I don't know that there's, at least in the civilian world, a whole lot of that going on. Most of the time on the
I agree. You're probably right.
Yeah.
But even today, I was telling you earlier, I ran the range today for rifle research on our department. And that's some of the drills we hit every time now. Is it isn't enough to simply shoot your target 2 times on lane 7 when the whistle beeps or whatever it is. We add in discriminating factors during the drills. You have to find your target, find some little cue on your target, because maybe there isn't a threat on your target and your neighbor's shooting, but you're not. If you don't break it down into a threat discrimination basis and we create malfunctions in the rifles intentionally, how does it, you have to fix the problem. And it's all about thinking. And when I start off on a range day, I tell people, this is the easiest part of shooting. Mm-hmm. The most important part is in here. You have to be a thinker to be a good shooter. It isn't just pulling a trigger. So, and I know Adam teaches a lot of the same things, and he's a great instructor.
Yeah, I really appreciate that about him, for sure. He's changed a lot about the way that I train, about the way that I look at being a protector, and how I just look at the world differently, honestly, in a lot of ways. Okay, we'll go on to the next thing that I kind of was wondering about. So I found it interesting, and I'm going to sort of do this in chronological order, but on page 26, you talk about your biological father, and you can help fill in the gaps here, but this is one of the interesting parts that I found. You said on page 26, sometimes I wonder if my getting into the narcotics world and working undercover was something burning inside of me since I was a kid. I was always embarrassed about my biological dad's past history. So tell us about that and how you came into law enforcement to begin with.
Yeah, so my mom divorced my dad when I was 3. He ended up going down the wrong path and started dealing drugs, and eventually was dealing heroin and got busted on a wiretap, and there was a whole sorts of problems. And yeah, that most of my friends knew that the dad who raised me was my stepdad, but I called him dad, and my biological dad had problems, and I still loved him. I had a soft spot for him, but yeah, I was embarrassed because in the way I was brought up, it was a very clean household and kind household, and he was a biker and a drug dealer, and it was kind of a polar opposite world of what I was living. And so when I would see him on holidays or something, I'd go back to that environment, and I just was never comfortable around those situations. And so then when I got into the law enforcement world, narcotics always just intrigued me. And again, I don't know, like I said in the book, I don't know if that's what caused me to want to work undercover and take drug dealers off, but it sure was interesting conversations with my bio father down the road.
Yeah, I bet.
He would ask I couldn't say certain things, but yeah, it was a kind of a unique thing. to come from that background. And I think it helped me a little bit later on when I would speak with people that we had busted, whether they became an informant or whether or not. I was like, hey, I got family in the same boat as you or as your family members. So I understand some of this life that you're living and some of the things that, is dragging you down. And so I can still have empathy for you. You might be going to jail, but I can still empathize that, hey, maybe this was an environment that you grew up in and you don't know any different.
Right.
I was just blessed that my mom moved on and the man who raised me is the person I am today.
I love this. Okay, let me move on here to some of the experience that you had as a police officer. And you speak specifically here in a little bit about the camaraderie that you felt. And I loved hearing about that because being someone who I haven't been in law enforcement, but I find it very interesting. But I have been in situations where I've been in some high stress training with a group of people that I know very well. And so on a small level, I can relate to that camaraderie. And I just love the way that you spoke about it. On page 16, and these are just some random sentences I underlined. They don't all specifically go together, but it says, society expects us to be the jack of all trades, and that is no easy task. But unbeknownst to most, law enforcement officers across this great country do so many more positive deeds on a daily basis than you will ever hear about. Later on, you say, I spent 16 years on a busy SWAT team and 14 years working undercover in narcotics. The bad guys opened up to me, and I was able to see the souls of the criminals in their own words at a time when they were not in handcuffs. And that kind of goes back to what you were talking about before on how in some way you could not relate to, but understand where some of these people were coming from. And it was like you got a glimpse or a window into a lifestyle and into the thinking perhaps of some of these people. And I just found that really interesting. And then another interesting part that I underlined was you said, by the time my field training and my first shift change were over, I had been on calls with a total of 12 bodies. Some of the guys in my class had not even seen one yet. So you got experience right out of the gate, like just immersed in this, it sounds like.
Yeah. So literally graduated academy on a Friday, like at noon. And I had to be back to work that night at midnight. They didn't even give us a day off. And that first night I had a homicide that we got called to. That was crazy. But yeah, by the time I had hit the streets, they had just stacked up. I'm like, so the realization hit pretty quick. This job's going to be interesting, if anything.
Yeah. And is there really anything in the academy they can do to really prepare you for that?
No, they show you photos and stuff. And on the one I just mentioned, the very first night of being on the streets, one of my academy classmates was also on that scene, and they didn't handle the scene very well. I don't know if they got sick, but they were basically unfunctionable at that point because it was such a shock. And for me, it wasn't. I hadn't seen dead bodies other than at funerals, but it just seemed that I had the ability right off the bat to just kind of compartmentalize. Hey, listen, that's a body. It's no longer a soul. It's gone. I have a job I have to do. Of course, I didn't know what I was doing, but I was able to kind of separate myself from the personal feeling of, and I feel so bad for them, but it's like, I got something to do. I can think about that later. So I was able to just to perform in those situations a little bit quicker, I think, than some other people that might have taken a longer time to get used to the bodies.
And does that just depend on the person? Because I don't know if I know over time, maybe that could be trainable through exposure, but is there just something in a person that's able to do that easier in some than others, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. People are cut differently.
Yeah.
But I think if you can, and I didn't know this then, but I've talked with some of my old bosses about it. They made the comment that, if you're a believer, that no matter what, that the soul is gone out of that body at that point. So now it's just an object. The person, the human that was in that is gone anyways. So it's just time to do your job and move forward and deal with the other stuff later.
Yeah, that makes sense. We'll dig into that a little bit later in the interview. I have specific questions for that. Speaking to the camaraderie, I found this to be interesting. So on page 58, see, if you guys had the book, you could follow along with me. So when you get the book, you can go back and watch this interview, and then we'll refer to all the page numbers here. On 58, and these are just a bunch of random passages I have underlined, but somewhat go together. On SWAT, the primary focus for the senior guys is getting the new guys up to speed ASAP, sharing of knowledge. No one person's individual needs are more important than the needs of the other teammates and the team itself. After my 16-year ride on SWAT, I will tell you this: I feel sorry for people who have not had the experience of being part of something that is bigger than yourself. And then you were talking about being on a team, like, and how you get to know the guys on your team, and where you trust the person next to you and you trust their decisions without question. You say, and you can recognize him when it's dark simply by his body shape or gait when walking, or even his smell. Like, that is a level of knowing someone that most people don't get to, other than like maybe with a spouse. And you said that level of intimate camaraderie is second to none, in my opinion. There are simply experiences that the corporate world does not offer. Military units and SWAT teams, that is about it for the closeness I am speaking of. There's like nothing else in your mind that compares to that type of camaraderie.
No, I don't. I go on to say there that even like a professional football team or a professional basketball team, those guys are unbelievable athletes, and they work their tails off. Absolutely. And they need to work together as a team. But at the same time, nobody's getting killed on a basketball court or a football field unless they have a medical issue, right? Nobody is saving somebody else's life or having their life saved, or so it just takes it to a whole different level. And I'm not deriding them for that. Mm-hmm. It's just different. When your life's in somebody else's hands and you have unquestionable faith that they're going to do what they're supposed to do to protect you and the other guys, it's just an unbelievable thing. And of all the things I miss from being retired, it's that.
Mm. Yeah, and that's not something that can be built or duplicated very easily, I imagine. Mm. That is something that takes time. And yeah, I can relate to that, but only on a very small level. Not quite what you're talking about, but it is fascinating to me. And then the other thing about camaraderie, that I didn't see this coming in the book. So when I read this, I was like, whoa, I did not expect that. And so it was really awesome. You have a picture on page 61 of your SWAT team doing a prayer before a high-risk warrant. And it says, sometime in 2011, I had enough courage to ask the guys on the SWAT team if they wanted to do a quick team prayer before we went out and did battle with our adversary. Eventually, even if I was not there to lead it, somebody else would lead the guys in prayer of thanksgiving and also for protection. I often tell people that the team prayer, not player, prayer, is one of my greatest accomplishments on the job. I love that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Because whenever you are in such life-threatening, high-risk situations, I imagine that knowing whose team you're on is really important, right?
Amen.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to 2020, which was a hard year for all of us, but especially for you. You were tasked with taking care of riots in, I assume, downtown. I don't remember. It's been a minute since I read this. Where were you at exactly for these riots?
They started Midtown and then they moved downtown.
Omaha?
Yeah, Omaha.
Omaha. Okay, yeah. So you say on page 241, and you can fill in the blanks here, but this is just, and now here we are on top of a 6-story police station in Omaha with sniper rifles and fully automatic M4s protecting our building. It's amazing to think that we had to do that in America. It was a crazy night for sure. So what went down?
Well, so riots? The very first night of the riots, are one of the main intersections in Omaha is called, it's 72nd and Dodge, and the city's cut north, south, and east and west from that intersection. And that's where the riots started. And then it's just like everybody made a beeline to leave and go downtown, and they started surrounding our central headquarters. So, of course, we beeline downtown as well.
Mm-hmm.
Another sniper and I went up to the top, the 6th floor, and we're doing Overwatch with bolt guns and M4s, and it was just insane. And our city was no different than anywhere else. I mean, like the Pacific Northwest, I mean, they got beat down for months, right?
Mm-hmm.
We only really had it hard for 3 days, and then probably semi-hard for 2 weeks. But it was just chaos. And early in the riots, our chief and our mayor was okay with it, and we beat them up pretty hard, to be brutally honest. I mean, it was kind of old school, and that was literally just to keep them from trying to take over a building.
Mm-hmm.
Heck, the police department in Lincoln, Nebraska, they lost control of their lobby for like a day because they allowed it to happen. And our chief and our mayor was not going to allow stores to get taken over and things like that. So we went through about almost all of the gas that we had on the SWAT team. Some local billionaire offered up his plane, and a couple of the gas riot team guys flew up to Minnesota and bought whatever they could and flew back on a private jet. And we outfitted our riot response team again because we were almost out. We had guys throw Molotov cocktails. There's a story in the book about one of the other snipers, Rob, was a couple pounds of pressure into his trigger to shoot a guy with a Molotov cocktail.
Oh, yeah.
But it's crazy.
Yeah.
You want to catch people on fire because you're angry? I don't understand it. And of course, we had the lasers and the large-scale fireworks and super soakers full of urines, like all other major places had to deal with. One of the real surprising things was, though, is we generally have pretty good support from the community here. I mean, Omaha is a pretty good town, minus the knuckleheads that commit crimes. There's usually pretty good support from the local politicians and from our upper command on the department and from the citizenry. And it just seemed like we lost all of that when those riots started. I talk about in there when they first started that night at 72nd and Dodge. I was the first SWAT guy on scene because I would have had to bypass the riots to go way out west to meet up with the team, to get in a van to come back to the riot. So I just jumped off in my take-home vehicle and figured I'd give them real-time updates. And I had a 19 or 20-year-old girl get in my face in the sea of thousands. F you, pig, I hope you effing die. And I'm thinking, what has ever happened to you that you want police officers to die?
Mm-hmm.
You live at home with mom and dad, out in West Omaha, the affluent part. But there was just so much anger in the country at the time from being cooped up and everything else. I think that the George Floyd incident gave people the feeling that I'm going to be done being cooped up. I'm going to go out and vent my frustrations, even if the frustrations had nothing to do with George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the hard thing. All the hard crap that I've done, whether it's undercover or SWAT stuff, was like, I'm getting 19-year-old girls tell me, hope I freaking die. And we're feel like you're sandbagged in on top of Central with machine guns and sniper rifles in the middle of America. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It was kind of a kick to the gut. You expect it from the quote unquote criminals, the whole cat and mouse game with criminals, and they don't like you. But from the people that supposedly support you, that was difficult. It's like, are we really at this position in the United States of America? So,
do you think that it's gotten better since then?
I think so.
Yeah.
There's still a contingent that I think still goes off of that same anger and hatred. Mm-hmm. But even in Omaha, not to turn this into a race thing, but sitting in the sniper positions, we did it for 2 weeks in different locations, and they would have little rallies here and rallies there. And of course, now they're putting in for permits to get them. And we'd watch off in the distance. Here'd come a group of 3 or 4 black guys who looked like they had been gang members when they were younger, a little bit older guys now. And they would look at the crowd and be like, nope, turn around and walk away. Because it was a bunch of white people that were from West Omaha and purple hair and green hair and nose rings and doing their protesting.
Yeah.
I think those people are still angry. but it wasn't even a race thing in Omaha, not even close to it. It was people were just frustrated over being cooped up and the restrictions and everything else, I think.
Yeah, it did a number on people's mental health. Honestly, it's still there's still things I think I still think there are lots of remnants of that mental health crisis all over America. But yeah, it was a crazy year for everybody. And I can't even imagine being in your position, the things that you saw and had to deal with as well. Just thank God you were somewhere where law enforcement was allowed to do their job.
Yeah, and I kind of kick myself that I don't mention more in the book, but I can't imagine being one of those cops in Seattle or Portland or something. My hat's off to those guys for whatever they did. That had to be insanely crazy.
With Hyde, yeah. Yeah, that would have been insane. If you've been listening to Defenders Live and something in you knows it's time to go deeper, not just in your training, but in your life, become a paid subscriber of Defenders Live. Each month we meet for a live group call, having real conversations about physical growth, emotional discipline, and spiritual strength. You'll be part of a growing community of people just like you, committed to becoming true defenders of life and of their families. This isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, doing the work, and not doing it alone. So go to defenders-live.com and become a paid subscriber and take your next step for becoming the kind of defender this world desperately needs. So let's see. I'm going to talk about your undercover work here in a minute, but first I want to talk about someone I'm very curious about. Her name is Edie, and you mentioned her in your book in a couple different places. First on page 73. And you're going to have to fill in the blanks on this too, but the part that I have underlined is Edie was a newer officer on the crew. She would become one of my all-time favorite cops to work with. Did you call her Ed or Ed? Ed. You called her Ed. Okay. Ed was, as we called her, was one tough lady, smart, dedicated, and somebody that I trusted to have my back in a gunfight. And I think you might have said more about her over here. I don't know, I put a star next to it, so it must be important. Here in the South Gang unit, the note about Roy started what would be one of my career favorite cases, and Edie helped me get it started. And then later in the book, you speak of her again. And again, it's been a minute since I read this, so I apologize. I don't remember all the details, but she later earned Officer of the Year for a case that I don't remember. I apologize, but she came up again in the book, and I just noticed that. So tell me about Edie and what was special about her.
Everything you said. She's just she's tough, she's smart, she's tenacious, a very good cop, a very good friend, more loyal than anything. And she was able to operate in a mostly male-dominated units, so to speak, the gang unit and narcotics unit, and she was just great. And it didn't matter to me that she happens to be a female. I would have cleared any house with her when I trust her, and she trained all the time, and she just was a good partner on the job. She was a good friend off of the job, and as we're going to talk about later, she was a huge balance for me at one point. So,
yeah. And so whether Edie was a woman or a man, but I find it interesting that she was a woman, because I know people personally who disagree with women being in law enforcement. So based on your experience, obviously you disagree with that. What are some of the things that you think women can bring to the table differently than men that are actually assets in law enforcement?
You got different perspective. And one of the things I say, I'm going to get in trouble here. Women can't do everything. Men can't do everything, right? Yeah. Right now, we have yet to have a female ever pass our SWAT physical test, and only a few have tried. And we don't do it to keep women out. It's, if you can't pass this standard, you can't drag me down the hallway if I get shot. And so just the biological difference of the strength to me is the difference. I did train with a female SWAT officer from the Nebraska State Patrol early on in my SWAT career, and this lady was a badass. She was very big framed, but she was also muscular, and she was as tough as most of the guys, and so she could physically do it.
Yeah.
But you bring the quality of just different intuition, and women have a better intuition than men, generally speaking. They don't always tap into it, but they bring a good intuition, and they can bring a balance to a bunch of dudes who may have a bad idea about something or looking at something wrong, just a different perspective. What's interesting, so my wife was a 30-year cop, and it looks like my daughter is going down that same road.
Oh, really?
So I'm going to have a different perspective of a father looking at a female in law enforcement than just a husband and wife or just a partner or something, a friend.
Wow.
So I'm going to get a different perspective. I think she hasn't had the offer yet, but it appears that it's coming.
Wow. Yeah, that's a whole different perspective. I bet that brings up a lot of different feelings for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, and some of the people I've talked to have said that some women are better equipped to speak to people, use their words better, de-escalate things through their words, especially with women, like they put women at ease, but sometimes even they put men at ease and de-escalate, because when you've got two men with egos involved in a situation, sometimes when you bring a woman into it, sometimes it can help, not always, but I thought that was interesting. Or when there's children involved, it seems as though children are maybe could be put more at ease by women sometimes than by men. So, yeah.
I'll say this, Laura. Omaha is a big department. It's supposed to be 900 cops. We're a little bit short right now, but I have worked with women that should have never been cops. I've worked with men that should have never been cops, or at least don't do the job appropriately. And I've worked with a ton of women that are good cops and a ton of guys that are good cops. There's good candidates in both genders. It needs the right person.
Yeah.
Again, there's aspects to it that are much harder for a woman just because of physics, right? But there's things that are harder for the guys that they're just not as good at. So we definitely need both. And I'm a huge supporter of women in law enforcement. I'm married to one for 30 years. And like I said, Edie was my favorite partner. And we're still friends today.
I love that. That's awesome. Maybe I should see if she could come on the show. That might be fun. All right, let's switch gears here just a little bit, because I learned something new in your book. I learned a lot of things in your book. I learned more about drugs than I ever wanted to know. But one of the particular things I learned was plainclothes versus undercover. And you speak to that on page 126, or at least start. So I'm going to read a little bit about that. I even love how this book feels. Everything about this book is well done. I don't know if you know this about me, but I have a marketing and advertising company, and I've actually designed book covers before. So printing is like a big thing of mine. Like, I really appreciate nice printing done well. And I'm one of those weirdos that like feels business cards after they're printed to see if they're high quality. And if they are, it's like this special thing. This book feels like that to me. So for whatever that's worth. Okay, so on page 126, you talk about plainclothes versus undercover, and you say there is a distinct difference between the two. A plainclothes might look like an undercover, but that is not undercover. It's plainclothes. Plainclothes officers are in an important position, and they are the people who assist the undercover officers, but they are not undercover themselves. There are very few true undercover officers in any given department or agency. Working undercover is not easy. It's a 24/7 job. That means responding to messages or calls even when you're off duty. And you speak a little bit to how you really have to learn how to play people. I would say manipulate, honestly. But you have to do it in a long-term way, not in a short-term way. And you got to play the long game, it sounds like. And let's see, I'm on page 128. Okay. And then you said eventually working undercover became much easier. It became second nature to cozy up to the bad guys. Sometimes I had to play tough. Sometimes I had to be a pushover. Sometimes I had to play dumb if questioned about things. I found a way to control the situation, but at the same time, let them think that they were calling the shots. Mostly, I controlled the situation by letting them know that I had a job and selling meth was a side gig for me. So when you were undercover, that was you were you pretended to be a construction worker, I think, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And you definitely look the part. You have a picture on page 129. You would have fooled me for sure. I mean, the Carhartt jacket, the dirty Carhartt looks pretty legit right there. And you talked about how you staged your vehicle so that you could cover your tracks if someone asked questions or just so that everything looked totally legit. Like you went the extra mile.
Yeah, it's I learned obviously I didn't do that at first,
Oh.
but I did. It went the extra mile. And guys used to tease me about all the props, as they call it, all the cones and construction helmets and plans in the window and stuff like that. And but I just kept learning more and more. And I talk in there about probably the smartest thing I ever did in the undercover world is after I'd arrested someone, you're their lifeline, because if they're gonna flip and work for you, then they may stay out.
Mm-hmm.
But so they'll be pretty honest with you. And so I would ask, hey, what about me did you believe and what didn't you believe? And so I started weeding out all of the didn't believes pretty fast. And I just got more comfortable in just being a character that was nobody. I didn't have to have a long backstory of who I was. I just needed to be a construction dude, and that's it. Because it was smooth for me. But yeah, I completely went the extra mile, and I would write up proposals to like replace a driveway and have that in my sun visor. Sometimes I write it up a couple hours before the deal, so like the date and everything is correct and addresses that I knew. And if someone questioned me, I can say, well, here's what I do. Here's where I'm going next. And I literally had a guy try to call BS on me and say, you're not a concrete dude. And so I just basically looked at him weird, and I gave him the bid sheet that I just filled out with an address and estimates and prices and measurements. And I basically told him to F off. If he didn't want my money, then go away. And he looks at it, he's like, huh, crap, I guess you do concrete. So he gave it back, and next day I bought dope from him, and I found out later that he was a prior informant for a county that surrounds us. So he knew the game, and he was just trying to cover his tracks. And I was still able to beat him because I was simply prepared. Not that because I'm awesome, but I was prepared with the things that if I get questioned, I can't just try to change the subject.
Mm-hmm.
I would have extra stuff there to make it look real.
And you had 14 years of experience at that.
Yeah.
Did you ever lose track of who you were? Like where you started and where you ended and where this other guy started and ended? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of a loaded question. Do we want to talk about it?
I don't know. You tell me.
It's the cover of the book. Yeah, I did kind of lose my way for a while. But it's not like in the movies where I got so deep undercover that I was doing criminal stuff and hanging out with the bad guys. Not in the least. Where I lost my way, Laura, was I was working so much, literally sometimes 18, 20 hours a day. And then if I got off late, super late, and had to be up in the morning for SWAT, I would just sleep in my truck in the parking lot or sleep on an old ratty couch in the basement of our SWAT office. Because I was going, we'd have to do a 6 a.m. brief for a warrant. I was working until 3 a.m. the night before.
Wow.
So what tore me apart was chasing those two different things, narcotics and all the things associated with narcotics, and then SWAT and all the things associated with SWAT. And those are kind of two divergent tasks, really. You're supposed to be locked on all the time, and this hut SWAT guy and tactical and your typical SWAT guy looking dude. And then you're supposed to be this undercover over here who is laissez-faire about stuff and just handles things differently. And I was trying to do both of them the best as I could. And like we mentioned, we were super busy on SWAT. Well, we were just as busy on narcotics.
Mm-hmm.
By the time it was said and done, between SWAT and narcotics, I'd served like 2,300 search warrants, and I rammed over 1,000 doors. And it was insanely fast paced. And so I find, and again, now the bad part of me is that I started to believe my own BS that I was pretty good.
Oh yeah, you said it right here in the book.
I'm kind of a badass.
Hey, can I read that part where you speak to that?
Yes.
Okay, this is on page 132. It goes into 133. This is a pivotal moment for you. So you said, eventually I began to think my shit did not stink. I was more than a little bit out of control sometimes. I wanted to do it my way. And let's see. I think you're speaking about your sergeant. You said, I thought I didn't need his guidance, and I could not have been more wrong. That out of control guy was also out of control outside of the job. I had a short fuse with my family and friends. I would snap at my wife for the smallest of things. I was so focused on being in control that I was out of control. What a mess. And then later on, you say, I was living a similar life to a meth dealer. I was on the move with no breaks. And when you cannot see yourself for what you are, you need your family and friends to let you know. You can remember your good friend Edie telling you one day, what the hell is wrong with you? You need to figure this out. And that was coming from a dear friend. What you did not realize at the time was your beautiful wife had been telling you the same thing for months, but you had not been listening. You say, I figured that if I was in control, it would all work out. And for that, I am sorry. The rest of the world was telling me that I was an asshole. And then I wrote here of my own notes, unpack this story. So this next part must be particularly interesting. The story of what happened is too long and convoluted to tell here, but I made some changes. I decided to intentionally put other people first in my life and try to slow down. I did not need to go to every SWAT call out. I did not need to work that much overtime. I wanted to put not only my family, my coworkers, and my friends first, but most importantly, Christ. I needed Christ more than anything at that moment, and with some guidance of a few friends, I was finally at the point to accept him into my life. I now realize that without him, nothing else really mattered. And after that, things became much easier for me. So could you unpack that for me?
That's a lot.
That is a lot. For one paragraph, that's a whole lot.
Yeah. So I kind of had a phony faith, if you will, and I believed in God, but that's for later, right? And this whole thing of being in control of everything, sometimes it still creeps back a little bit. Not very much, but it does. And as a SWAT guy, you got to control everything. As a narcotics guy, you got to control, especially undercover, you got to control everything. And I was a uber out of control freak. And it started to get to the point, like when Edie mentions what's wrong with you, things were just starting to go south. And I think God was reaching out saying, hey, relax, dude. Let's just let it go. But as the book reads, and I was starting to melt down and not wanting to hear from anybody else. And I got it. It's all good. I'll do this. I'll do that. But because it was me wanting to do it on my time, my way all the time. And I had a friend at church that kept asking me to go to this retreat, like over about a 2-year period. They have like every 6 months. And I kept telling Vince, I'm too busy. And I was crazy busy, but I could have taken a couple of days of vacation and gone to this retreat to try to slow down a little bit. And so I'm driving home from work one night, and this is going to get tough. Driving home from work one night, usually I'm still blasting Metallica, and I'm probably drinking yet another Monster and still riding that high of basically being a legal meth guy because I'm doing what they're doing. I'm just not using drugs. Mm-hmm. And this particular night I had the radio off, and I was just so frustrated because nothing had gone right that day. the simplest things I couldn't make happen right. And I'm
Mm.
usually the guy that's getting stuff done. Not trying to brag, but I was successful at the things I was doing. And this particular day, everything kind of piled up and nothing went right. I mean, it was just I was so frustrated the whole day, and it kept building and building and building. I'm like, I can't do anything right. Like I said, I was driving home just trying to figure out what had gone wrong all day with no music going. And I heard an audible voice that said, "It's okay, Paul. It's okay, Paul. Let go. I'm in control." And it scared the heck out of me.
Wow.
I heard a voice, and I turned around, looked in the back of my two-door Blazer at the time, tiny little undercover car, and I knew exactly who it was. And it was scary to me, Laura, because I knew who it was, and I realized that he should have no reason to know me because I have done nothing in a relationship with God, nothing. Mm-hmm. And so it scared me. I realized, hey, if he's literally reaching out to me, it must be, I must be in pretty deep. And so I got home the next morning and I called my buddy Vince, like, hey, I don't care when this next retreat is, but I have to go. And luckily it was only a couple of weeks later. And I went to that retreat and I gave my life to Christ, and things weren't immediately perfect, but they were much better. And I'm so happy with the timing because it was only a few months later when I got involved in that shooting. And I don't think I'd be sitting here talking to you today if I hadn't had Christ as my Savior and had that shooting take place that we discussed earlier. I'm not saying I wouldn't be alive, but I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today. So and his timing is perfect. And I'm just thankful for how it went down. And I now follow him every day and try to be a light to others when I can, when I'm not screwing up my own way. But I'm no longer ashamed to admit that I follow Christ. And in the end, it's the only thing that's going to matter to us. All our family and friends, everything's going to go away with the exception of Christ. So without him, we literally have nothing.
Wow. I didn't see that coming. I appreciate you opening up about that moment.
I've given that witness dozens of times, so it's not that hard. It just, I get emotional, not because I'm sad or sappy. Is it every time I get emotional about it, it's simply because I can't thank him enough for, he had quit waiting on me and like, hey, smack me across the face. I need to get your attention before something really bad happens. And so I'm just so thankful for that.
Yeah.
And people can believe me or disbelieve me all they want. I know what I heard. He works in his own ways, in his own times, and I'm completely cool with that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm just soaking it in. Because I can relate to, on a small level, the feeling of having to be in control all the time and the honest illusion that I think that I am. Which is just madness in and of itself because it's just not true at all. And I've been dealing with that myself lately. So, and then what I wrote down while you were speaking to leading up to your experience, where you said that you were having a hard time slowing down and losing control. My question was, what were you so afraid of? Like, why couldn't you slow down? What were you, if you slowed down or you were out of control, what did that mean?
I don't even know. I don't think anybody's ever asked me that before. I don't know if I was afraid of something or it's just, I just wanted more. I honestly don't know.
Really?
I wanted to be the greatest undercover dude around. I don't know what was driving me. I just loved it so much. And the sad part is that I didn't realize how much I was missing of other things being gone so much.
Yeah, and it's probably not an overnight thing. It's a slow thing that you probably slowly lose sight over time of the most important things and get really tunnel visioned. And so, yeah. And you spoke to a couple of people that you lost. And I wanted to bring that up only because you talked about how much different that experience was for you. Because I think Jason, you lost prior to you coming to Christ, and Greg was after. Am I correct about that?
That's correct.
So, could you talk to me about how that experience was different for you, or any details that you want to share about it? Because on page 140, you said, when Greg died, it was hard, but I was at peace. Unlike when Jason died, I was not at peace. I was a wreck, to be honest. But this time was different. I had a relationship with Jesus, and so did Greg. To know Jesus is to know peace. Amen.
Yes. Yeah. So, Jason they were both so full of life guys. I mean, like favorite guys on the department.
Mm.
Everybody loved them. And I got lucky enough to ride with Jason. And the embarrassing part about it is Jason, or Ty, as a lot of guys called him, he would tell me that him and his wife prayed every night before bed.
Mm.
And I pretty much just changed the subject.
Really?
Not because I didn't want to hear about it, and not because I didn't believe in God in general. I knew nothing. I couldn't have passed the most basic quiz on Christianity. I maybe could tell you the difference between Jesus and Joseph, and that would have been it. I just wasn't raised in the faith, but I believed in God. And so I'm like, oh, that's cool, and then change the subject because I didn't want to get exposed for not knowing anything. I was embarrassed.
Wow.
So I didn't even get to go down that road of listening to him talk about his faith. And unfortunately, we only rode together for 9 months, and it didn't get to blossom past that. And I had known Greg much longer, and Greg was on the department for quite a long time compared to Jason. And the first 9 or 10 years of Greg, we didn't really talk about our faith. He died in 2014. I had my conversion in 2010. But those last 3 years, that literally turned into the lion's share of our conversations, or at least part of every conversation. So we both knew each other was very confident in our salvation. And so Jason's death was abrupt, got shot and killed. Greg's death was not as abrupt, but it still went pretty quick, just a couple of days. And the entire time that he was dying, people still thought he was going to make it. And I told my boss, I said, Greg's not going to live. He's going to die. He's like, well, the doctors aren't saying that. I'm like, telling you, the guy's going to die. I know it in my heart of hearts. I literally think that God had put on my heart that, hey, you need to be strong this time. And that's in effect what happened. I ended up being named the department liaison for his widow. So they funnel all questions and stuff through one person, which ended up being me after Greg had passed. So the widows aren't getting bombarded by 50 people calling about this and calling about that and benefits and funeral and stuff. So if they would have asked me to be the department liaison when Jason was killed, I couldn't have done it. But I gladly accepted that for Greg. And I just was at peace because I knew that he had finished his race, and he basically gets to go meet Jesus. So a little bit of jealousy, in a semi-jokingly way, but it's it literally goes back to the comment, to know Jesus is to know peace. And I didn't know him before, and I was an absolute wreck when Jason was killed, and I almost quit the job. I had another job lined up.
Really?
And I'm so glad I didn't quit and take that job. Yes.
Wow. It is really interesting, the timing of all of the things you speak about.
Yeah, that's because it's his timing.
I know.
His timing is perfect.
Yeah. And how long have you been retired?
So I retired from full-time work in spring of 2022, but just under a year later, I came back and I've been working as a part-time firearms and tactics instructor for the last 2.5 years.
Okay. But that's still pretty current. Yeah. It hasn't been that long ago.
No.
Wow.
Yeah, I left a little bit early. I had so many surgeries, multiple rotator cuff surgeries, multiple knee surgeries. My body was just so broke down from SWAT.
From the RAM, from being the breacher, right?
Yes, that's a huge part of it. And my longtime boss, 18 of my 23 years full-time, my boss and my mentor and my guide on the department was retiring after 30. And so I retired the same time he did.
Oh, I see.
So but at the time, I couldn't physically do the job. I was on limited duty from my second rotator cuff surgery.
Wow.
And I was just sitting behind a desk. And it probably took me a whole nother year, so almost a 2-year stint of not being able to do anything. I couldn't have been in work narcotics and helped one of my teammates out in a fight if it happened, because my shoulders were so destroyed that it's like, I'm not really a cop anyways. So when he retired, I just left.
Well, that's a perfect lead in to the last thing I wanted to talk to you about on my list, which is on page 255, which is one of the most impactful statements of your book for me. I'm going to get teary-eyed just even thinking about it, and I haven't even read it yet. Let me find it here. So on 254, for whatever reason, I know the reason, but I highlighted this paragraph, and then I'll go into more details here. But it says, "This is a true story and one of many almost exactly like it. In fact, the reason for this reflection is this. I quite often relate this story or a similar one to people when they seem apprehensive to open a new chapter in their life. When it's time for them, I'm losing it already. When it's time for them to make a change and go through that next door, a lot of people can be hesitant. They simply don't know what is on the other side. I would quite often tell them to trust that God has a plan and to simply move forward. And I believed it, or so I thought." And then you speak to your experience with this. On page 255, you say, "But when it came time for me to retire from the SWAT team in 2022, that next door I had to open was the hardest door I had come into contact with. I felt as if it slammed behind me, locked. No going back. I also felt like it was a door to nowhere, like walking into a massive, dark, empty room. No signs of where to go from here. No receptionist, no lights leading the way, just me in a dark, silent room. However, I had one more door to go through. I was retiring from the police department in just a few days. Closing the final door of my career, I prayed about this door. Not praying that God had chosen a good path for me, but rather praying that I could lift up my will to that of His. Praying that He could help me follow the path laid out before me." And then at the bottom you say, "Now I follow Him, even though I sometimes try to go back to the old Paul and be in control of everything. Yet it is yet another learning point that when we give our lives to Christ, it is not the end of our journey. Rather, it is simply the beginning. We will stumble along the way. We will revert to our old selves. Once in a while, we will forget to put on the armor of God and try to go it alone." I just have to thank you for writing that.
Well, I'm glad that you liked it, and I'm glad that it has meant something to some people, and because it meant a lot to me, and it was from the heart. And it's, if you want to say I'm a wimp or whatever, bring it on. I'll fight you. I don't care, because the only real judgment that I want is His judgment. I'm a big, strong guy, and I do manly things and used to do a lot more manly things. But, what I tell people is that Christ died for His friend Lazarus. So why can't we also be emotional beings and have that softer side. And so I'm not embarrassed by that. If, again, people want to say I'm a softie, well, then yes, that's true. I'm a softie. I don't care.
It really is it's inspiring to me to see somebody that has come through all of the years that you've come through and seeing all the things you've seen, having to work undercover for 14 years and come out the other side. The person that you are is inspiring, that you didn't come out with a hard, calloused heart where you're completely jaded and the world sucks and you hate it and all these things that you came through. I keep saying on the right team, but with Jesus by your side, knowing like what's actually most important in life. And that is really inspiring. Yeah.
Well,
So that just proves it can be done.
yes. If this guy can do it, so can
Yeah.
anybody
It's like
else.
not everybody that goes through that goes through the meat grinder, comes out completely hopeless and without hope. But what I can relate to in this is like everybody has a door they have to walk through. It doesn't matter if it's, in your case, it was retirement, but we all go through chapters, seasons in our lives where we're met with a door. And
Yeah,
it's like
100%.
Yeah.
And how that starts is as you read it, it talks about briefing at a search warrant. We're going to go take down a homicide suspect who we know is armed. I do that so many times, and those doors never gave me any apprehension. And here you're simply going to retire, and it's freaking you out, or you're trying to make a change in life, and you know that you're not going to get killed by making this change. We get so apprehensive of the things that we want to try to control, and yet I used to be paid to do the extremely dangerous stuff, and that didn't give me apprehension because I'm just going to control what I can there. So
wow.
That reflection truly came from the heart. I just sat down at the computer. I had like 3 or 4 days left on the job, and I'm like, well, I'm going to lose this access. And I thought, I've been really thinking about this. Let me just start typing, and it just came out.
Yeah. So the analogy of the doors. Yeah, that is a perfect analogy for your career and for so many people reading this that haven't been in law enforcement but can relate to. That's really just the human experience. It's like,
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny that the timing of this interview, because even this morning I spoke about it's the same thing. It's about a door being in front of you. And I spoke about how hard it was for me, because I don't know why, but in my community, I have a channel where through Defenders Live and through my social media, I really work to inspire people to show up, because for me, I think that's the hardest thing for people to do sometimes. Like if they're looking to be more healthy in their life, whether they've got fitness goals or they've got nutrition goals, or they just want to feel better about themselves, any of that stuff, you can put this on multiple levels, right? On what goals are. But for so many people, just like they get to the doorway and they don't walk through it. And I struggle with that this morning, just showing up. So I just made a video and I was just like, hey, today was hard for me to show up. I'm like sitting there with my rifle, my handgun. I have this workout, this dry fire that I must do. And I'm getting ready for this competition. And I know that I need to do it, but I'm like this mental thing of like trying to talk myself out of it or justify it away or make excuses and all this stuff. It's like, no, it's right there. Get over the threshold of the door and you'll be fine. And that's for a lot of people the hardest part. Because once you're through the threshold, it's like it's game on. Like you're in pure action at that point. And it's like, for me, I think one of the biggest things I've learned is when there's hesitation, if it's just because of me justifying or making excuses, the answer is always action.
Yeah, I agree. Hesitation is bad in the SWAT world and in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So what did we not cover that do you think would be valuable to people just in their everyday lives based on your experience? Because there's so much to get from this book on so many different levels.
Oh, gee. Well, thank you for saying that. We're all going to fail in something. Try again and set your goals high, and don't forget the moment that you're living in with the people that are in your life and that you love. And it's not my comment, but nobody was on their deathbed and stated, man, I wish I would have worked more. or I wish I would have. It's all about relationships, and I wish I would have got more time with my kids or my spouse or my friends or my parents. It's just, and then also trying to listen is what is his will and where is he wanting you to go.
Mm.
I think literally most people can say that, but do people actually pray that? If I'm not seeing where you want me, lead me, which is my daily deal at this point. What am I supposed to be doing? And if it's continuing to work part-time on the department, training the younger guys, I'll keep doing it. If he wants me somewhere else, I'm kind of obtuse sometimes, so you might have to smack me across the face and you know where that is.
He knows that about you, though.
That's my morning prayer. Was lead me where you want me to be. So
the difference now is that you are actually listening on purpose.
Yes. Yeah. I was not, and I was not listening probably on purpose for a big chunk of my life.
Yeah.
Well, that's for later. I don't want to hear that.
Right.
Don't tell me what I need to change, but yeah, I couldn't be happier right now in life. And I'm just blessed with the people that I get to see and interact with. Meeting you has been great.
Oh.
I appreciate the opportunity here. And I'm glad this wasn't just about SWAT and undercover, and we get the real life stuff, because that's what's most important.
Yeah.
But those are the things that create what your life is. So I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if a bunch of those things had never happened.
Yeah, and what I think I appreciate the most about you is that it's obvious your identity, even though it was hard for you, which I can only imagine how hard it would be, but your identity is in Christ. Your identity is not in your job. And I know it was for a long time, but
Yes.
it switched. And I'm thankful for that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So go buy his book, guys. ram1productions.com is where you can buy this book, Ram1. And then if you want to train with him, I assume you do civilian training as well?
I do.
Okay. rammastertraining.com for those of you who are listening and not watching, rammastertraining.com. Highly recommend this. I think that once you get a hold of it, you're going to have a hard time putting it down, because that was my experience with it. And I usually don't mark up books as much as I marked up this one. It's really captivating, and you tell these stories with great detail, but it's like the perfect length. The stories are the perfect length. So I just get, I don't know, it's a great synopsis. And as soon as I start to get like, with one of them, you switch to something else. And I'm like, whoa, what is this about? This is crazy. And yeah, it's just great. Like, you're never going to get bored reading this book.
So Laura, I thank you for that. I thank you for the plug. I do have to give credit to my editor, Sandy Wendell. She was the one that basically reorganized the order of it, and that's what keeps it going.
Yeah.
Her organization of how it flows was her. I wrote the stories, and she kind of changed the order. And one last thing I would say is that thank you for putting up the website for the book. But if you're already on Amazon, that link basically takes you to Amazon.
Oh, okay.
My website isn't me processing it. It's just a link to Amazon. So Amazon, you can find it by typing in the title of the book.
Okay.
It's on audio, it's on ebook or paperback. So
did you read the audio version?
I did not. And I learned so much in this book process. I had so many family members, friends, oh, you got to read the book. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. And I told the editor, and she laughed at me. She says, no, unless you're like a famous actor, nobody does their own books. It doesn't work out.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
I actually like your voice.
Oh, right.
I think your voice would be good on it, but that's just my opinion. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that, but anyway, well, thank you for your time today, Paul. I really was looking forward to this interview, and it exceeded my expectations. You're an absolute pleasure to speak with. Incredibly gracious, heart of gold. And I just cannot believe the same guy that I'm sitting in front of listening to is like the same guy that went through all of this stuff. Like, it's just amazing to me. So thank you for what you've done and for your sacrifice to the job I'm sure you've done so much good in this world, and I'm sure that good that you're going to do is just beginning. So really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Laura. It was a pleasure. You're a kind and gracious host. So